Have you ever noticed that the smartest people you know never actually tell you they're leaving? There's no final phone call, no big blow up, no dramatic exit speech. One day, a person who used to be everywhere, every group chat, every birthday, every Sunday dinner, is just less present. A text goes unanswered, an invitation gets a polite maybe next time, and then another one does and another, until somebody finally looks around and says, wait, what happened to them? And here's the part almost everyone gets wrong. It's not because that person thinks they're better than you. It's not because they stopped caring. Something much quieter happened. And once you understand what it actually is, you will never look at a quiet person the same way again. Here's what almost nobody tells you. The people who disappear the most quietly are usually the ones who are paying the most attention the whole time. Not the bitter ones, not the burned out ones, the aware ones. By the end of this video, you're going to understand the 4 hidden stages that lead a sharp, self-aware person to slowly step out of the crowd. The first 3, you'll probably recognize in yourself or someone you know, but stick around for the 4th one, because that's the stage almost nobody admits out loud, even to themselves. And once you hear it, you won't be able to unhear it either. Let's start at the beginning. The moment the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Nobody is born suspicious. Nobody starts life reading between the lines. As kids, we take people at face value. If someone smiles at you, they like you. If someone says, let's hang out soon, they mean it. That's the default setting. Then somewhere along the way, usually after a few too many disappointments, something in the brain flips. Psychologists call it pattern recognition, and it's one of the most useful and most exhausting tools the human mind has. It starts small. You notice that one coworker only texts you when they need a favor. You notice that a friend gets a little colder every time something good happens to you, like your success is somehow taking something away from them. You notice the compliment that has a blade hidden inside it. Wow, you actually pulled that off. Technically nice, but not really. At first you brush it off. Everybody has an off day, but then it happens again and again. And your brain, which is at its core a prediction machine, starts building a model. It starts connecting Tuesday's weird comment to last month's excuse and that time 3 years ago when they forgot to invite you. None of these things look like much on their own. Together they tell a story. And here's the part that changes everything. Once your brain builds that model, it doesn't turn off. You can't unnotice a pattern. Ever tried unseeing a word once you know it's hidden in a picture? You physically cannot look at that picture again without seeing it instantly. Social patterns work the exact same way. And that's the first quiet door that opens. Not cynicism, just clarity. The bill nobody warned you about. Here's something almost nobody talks about because it doesn't show up on any test. Paying attention has a cost. Think about what's actually happening when a highly self-aware person sits in a room full of people. They're not just hearing words, they're tracking tone, timing, who interrupts who goes quiet when a certain topic comes up, whose smile doesn't reach their eyes. That's not one conversation happening. That's 3 or 4 conversations happening at once, all inside one skull. Cognitive load researchers have a name for this. They call it social monitoring overhead. And studies tracking mental fatigue in group settings have found that people who score higher on self-monitoring and social awareness burn measurably more mental energy per hour than people who are just along for the ride. It's not in their head, it's in their heart rate, their glucose levels, their post-event exhaustion scores. More processing, more inference, more second-guessing of subtext. And processing has a price tag, same as running a computer with 40 tabs open instead of 4. That's why a 2-hour dinner with the wrong group of people can leave a sharp, perceptive person feeling like they ran a marathon, while everyone else at the table is bouncing out the door, energized, already planning the next hangout. It's not that something is wrong with the tired one, it's that their engine is doing more work per minute. Give that engine enough years of overtime, and it starts doing something completely rational. It begins asking a simple, brutal question before every invitation. Is this going to fill me up, or is it going to cost me? And once a person starts asking that question honestly, not out of drama, but out of self-preservation, their calendar starts looking very different. Quick pause. If any of this sounds familiar so far, drop a 1 in the comments right now before you keep watching. I want to know how many of you are nodding along. Okay, let's keep going because stage 3 is where things get personal. Realizing it was never really about you. This is the stage that quietly rewires how a person sees every relationship they've ever had. Carl Jung had a phrase for it. He called it projection. The short version, most people aren't reacting to you. They're reacting to a version of you they built inside their own head, using spare parts from their own insecurities, jealousies, and unresolved stuff. The relative who criticizes your choices out of nowhere? A lot of the time, they're not actually talking about your choices. They're talking about the choices they didn't make. The friend who suddenly goes cold the moment something great happens to you? That's rarely about you either. That's often somebody standing in front of a mirror they didn't ask to look into. This is a heavy realization the first time it lands. But it's also, strangely, one of the most freeing things a person can figure out. Because once you genuinely understand that a huge chunk of how people treat you has almost nothing to do with you, it's their history, their fear, their own unfinished business bouncing off you like light off a mirror, you stop absorbing it. You stop taking the bait. You stop rehearsing arguments in the shower with people who were never really arguing with the real you in the first place. That doesn't make a person cold. If anything, it makes them more patient because they can finally see the fear behind somebody's sharp comment instead of just the comment itself. But it also means they stop signing up to be anyone's emotional punching bag. And that alone quietly ends a lot of relationships that were only ever built on one person constantly absorbing the other person's leftover feelings. The part almost nobody admits. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because this is the stage people rarely say out loud, even to themselves. Somewhere in all of this, the pattern recognition, the exhaustion, the projection, a quiet, secret question starts forming. What if I actually like it better without them? Not I hate people, not I'm better than everyone, just a genuine, guilty feeling preference for silence over small talk. For one real conversation over 10 shallow ones. For a Friday night alone with a book over a party where you'll spend 3 hours performing a version of yourself that isn't even real. Nobody wants to say that out loud because we're taught from childhood that wanting to be alone is a red flag. Popularity gets rewarded. Being social gets rewarded. Nobody gives out an award for the person who quietly skipped the group trip to finish their own thoughts. But here's what the research on solitude actually shows. Intentional alone time, the kind you choose, not the kind that gets forced on you, is linked to better emotional regulation, sharper decision-making, and a stronger, steadier sense of who you actually are underneath everyone else's expectations. Silence isn't empty. For a mind that's been overstimulated for years, silence is where the noise finally clears enough to hear your own thoughts for the first time. That's the real secret hiding behind stage 4. It's not that intelligent people fall out of love with people. It's that they fall in love with clarity. And once you've tasted what your own undivided mind sounds like, going back to constant noise feels like a downgrade you can't unknow. How the disappearance actually happens. Here's the thing about all 4 of these stages. Nobody experiences them as one big decision. It's never "I quit" people written in a diary on a Tuesday. It's 100 tiny decisions, stacked so slowly that even the person making them barely notices. It's declining one invitation because you're tired and realizing the world didn't end. It's not returning one text right away and noticing that nothing bad happened. It's skipping one group chat argument you would have jumped into a year ago and feeling lighter instead of guilty. Each one of those moments is small, but small decisions, repeated for months, quietly build into a completely different life. And from the outside, it looks sudden. One day, someone realizes, wait, when's the last time I actually saw them? But on the inside, that shift had been building for a long, long time. It wasn't a door slamming. It was a door closing an inch at a time, so gently nobody, including the person closing it, heard it happen. What this actually means. So if you've noticed yourself pulling back lately, skipping the parties, letting texts sit longer, feeling relieved instead of guilty when plans get canceled, I want you to hear this clearly. That's probably not a personality flaw. That's not you becoming distant or losing your people skills. That might just be your mind finally getting honest about what actually fills you up versus what just fills your schedule. And that's not something to apologize for. Protecting your own energy isn't selfish. It's one of the most mature things a person can learn to do, usually far later in life than they wish they had. You're not disappearing from the world. You're just done performing for people who were never really watching you in the first place. And the people who are actually worth your time, they'll notice you're quieter. And instead of walking away, they'll lean in closer. That's how you'll know who was ever really paying attention to begin with. If this video describes something you've been feeling but couldn't quite put into words, do this for me. Comment the number of the stage that hit closest to home. 1, 2, 3, or 4. And if stage 4 was the one that actually made you uncomfortable, just type stage 4. You don't have to explain. I read every single comment, and I promise you're not the only one who's going to type it. If you want more videos that put language to the things you've always sensed but never said out loud, subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next one.